Right, so we're live. Welcome to this hangout with Elaine and Hilides. Today we're going to talk about cravings and feeling powerless against cravings in terms of what it's like to give up smoking and all other addictions. Now, Elaine is here today because she has had an amazing amount of success with in the field of addictions. Working with all sorts of things to do with food or drugs or alcohol or smoking, and has seen an amazing response and transformations within these people. And it's also using the same understanding that I do in terms of understanding where your experience is coming from, and so which cuts the addiction off at the cause rather than just dealing with the addiction itself, which is the symptom. So welcome, Elaine.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for being
Nice
here.
to be
It's an
here with
honour.
you.
Good. So basically, I'd just love to ask about your background. Could you tell us a bit about your successes and how you came into this, so that people can get an idea of what you're good at doing, please?
Okay. Oh, well, I'm good at doing, I don't know. I started working with the principals. I came to the principals about 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And from then on, it didn't make sense to work with any of the methods I'd used before. So that's what I've been using since then. And I started about 6 years ago working with people who had food addiction, who wanted to lose weight. And that got me really interested in the whole field of addiction. And then it must be about 4 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I can't remember now, I started a wellbeing group for those that were in drug and alcohol and mental health recovery, and started sharing the principles with those once a week, which was wonderful. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. We've moved area now, so I'm going to find another group, but still keep in touch with the old group anyway. But what was so wonderful is seeing how people told me in the group that they had been abstinent before they got this understanding, and then they felt they had truly recovered, which is really nice.
Yeah, that is amazing. Nice. Yeah.
But you see, when you're abstinent, you still think you have the craving for something, but you're not having it because you know you shouldn't, or it's not good for you, or you don't want to do it anymore, whatever the reasons are. But as I say, when you abstain, you still think you want it, but you're not going to have it because you're going to be strong and you're going to fight it. When you realize where the addiction is coming from, you're free. And you know, there's nothing to fight because the addiction is coming from you. Every addict, whether it's smoking, drugs, alcohol, every addict, their primary addiction is to thought, not to where they think their addiction lies.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So great. So the people who are going to be listening to this have probably tried to give up smoking a lot, right? They've probably tried. I've heard from quite a few people, I'm a tough cookie. You know, I've tried this before. I've tried NLP. I've tried, hypnosis. You know, I read that book, all this different stuff.
Yes.
And they've kind of got it in their head that it's not possible in some way. And so I kind of want to open up that a little bit as well before we talk about the cravings, because you've obviously seen how it is completely possible, and it isn't like this hard grill will-powered experience that it presumes to be.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of people that come to me anyway that want to give up smoking, they want to and they don't want to. So they know that they should for health reasons. They know that maybe it's costing them a lot of money. They know that they don't want to go and stand outside a restaurant. They know all the reasons they should give up smoking. But there's not many people, it seems, that really feel that they want to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's the key, isn't it? Whether you want to do something or not. Now, a lot of the people that have read the book, they've had the NLP, they've done the hypnotherapy, they're looking for something to take it away. So they don't want to deal with it themselves, really. They just want someone to take it away. So you don't want to smoke anymore. You know, magic, you don't want to smoke anymore. Well, I mean, I'd love to have that magic wand. It'd be great if you could just say to people, you don't do it anymore, and that's fine. So I think anyone that comes to me to stop smoking, it's really for them to ask them, okay, why do they want to stop smoking? But also not only why the addiction, but what is the addiction giving them that they think? You see, because while somebody thinks it calms them down, or all the other reasons that people smoke, it helps them concentrate, all of these things, while they have those things running in their head, then obviously nothing on the outside is going to work. Does that make sense to you? Now, it can happen. I had one lady that came to me for a different issue altogether, and she was telling me how her mother, this woman was just coming up to retirement at 65, and her mother, she said she didn't remember ever seeing her mum eat. Her mum used to exist on 40 cigarettes a day, coffee and a whiskey in the evening. And then her mum got Alzheimer's and overnight forgot she smoked.
Wow.
So she'd been a smoker since she was something like 12. And I think she was in her early 80s, and she forgot she smoked.
Wow.
So you see, now obviously I'm not wishing that on anyone, but doesn't that show you if it was a physical need, she would still have a physical need? Because you still have a physical need to eat. You still have a physical need to go to the toilet. Yeah, you're okay. If you've got things wrong, you may not remember, but your body still does it. But there's no physical need to smoke.
Yes.
Whereas that's the bit that people...
That is amazing, yeah, because...
That's the bit they struggle with, because they think it's that their body's got used to it and they have... Well, no, you know, the nicotine is out of your body in a day. It's always going to be 99% mental and 1% physical.
Wow. So, I mean, she must have thought, you see, because this is it. We've got into our head, oh, nicotine's it's just as addictive as heroin. And, you know, they say sugar's just addictive as crack. And they kind of put them all on these different addiction levels. So what would you say that they mean by that then? If it's like...
Well, it's part of the brain that lights up. It's the neurotransmitters and all the technical stuff that I can't remember unless I'm reading it out. But the thing is that the same part of the brain lights up. It's the same part of the brain lights up, whether it's heroin or chocolate. And it's that people call it, and that's why people call it an addiction, because they do lump everything together. But the thing is, I when I worked with people that they've been addicted to, you know, to hard drugs, there was one guy who said to me that he used to get the clucking, so everything would be going when he needed a fix, and he would be in pain. And then he said that he could understand what I was talking about, the role of salt in this, because he said that as soon as he had bought the drug, as soon as it was in his hand, the clucking stopped. The symptoms went. So he hadn't even cooked it, let alone actually taken any, ingested any. So how did the clucking stop?
Yeah.
Because he thought, I have relief. I can have this soon. You see?
Absolutely, yeah.
But that's why people, you see, the part of the brain that lights up with any of these things is the reward part of the brain. Now, we as human beings, we are pleasure seekers. So we want to do the things that gave us pleasure once. But with addiction, the thing that gave you pleasure once often doesn't give you pleasure again. Because
totally, that's, I mean, in my own experience with cocaine is exactly that.
Yes.
Smoking definitely, when I gave up smoking, it was definitely that. It was like every time I would put it in my mouth, I'd be like, what am I doing?
Why?
Why?
Yes.
This is nothing. Like when you get really present, it doesn't do anything for you at all. Like,
yes,
like the inhaling of the cigarette and the exhaling doesn't actually do anything.
Yes.
If you can feel something on the back of your throat, that's it, really.
Yes.
And the cocaine, I tell you what it was for me, it was the moment the line went up my nose. And it was the same, it was this, and then it's gone. And that was it. That was it. And there was so much paranoia, etc., etc. And smoking's an interesting one, because it's almost like, it's like in some way, it doesn't give us any high, or it doesn't actually change the way that we feel in any way, really, does it? I don't think it does.
Well, you see, when you're just saying, you see, what happens is we get tricked by the dopamine soaked memories of when it was good. Yeah, and that's the part of the brain, as I say, the reward part, because then, so we keep looking for that, we keep repeating the behavior looking for that. So somebody, certainly a first cigarette is not going to taste nice when someone just has it, but then there's a time with obviously with the tolerance that you build up, that you feel like you get something from the cigarette. So it could be a feeling, depends how young you are when you start, it could be a feeling of peer acceptance, it could be all sorts of things that you think you're getting from the cigarette. Well, you're not getting that from the cigarette, you see, but you're looking constantly for that feeling. So that's why we repeat a behavior that gives us nothing, doesn't do anything for us, doesn't give us anything, but we look for that feeling again. Well, when you recognize the feeling will never come from the outside, because the feeling is only ever generated from the inside, it allows you off the hook, because you don't need to keep chasing the feeling.
Yeah, I see that. So what you're saying is that it could be anything. We don't need to analyze why we smoked in the first place.
No.
Definitely it was peer acceptance for me. Absolutely. Yes. I didn't enjoy it. It was gross. Yes. I can't remember the switch from being gross to being happy to smoke, really. Yes. But
it didn't hurt anymore.
It didn't hurt anymore. But I definitely remember when having a drink or something like that, it would be so awful not to have a cigarette, but also everyone else would go outside, and there's this kind of social acceptance stuff in certain circumstances. But what you're doing is you're relating the feeling of smoking to a circumstance in the past where it was a good circumstance, or it could be even, you're with a guy or something like that, and you're having a really good time, and it's a nice setting, and you're having a cigarette in this nice setting.
Exactly.
And so then when you imagine smoking, you really glorify it as this.
Well, because absolutely, because what you're doing is you're relating it back to that. Because I've had clients. I remember one client. Yes.
Well, because it's not like, every time you put a fag to your mouth, you're going, I remember this time when I smoked. It's not like it's a conscious relation, but it was when you did it. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, it's so quick, isn't it? You see, don't forget, in the principles world, the whole thing's are bandied around how many thoughts we have a day, and Stanford University say it's 60,000 a day, and the laboratory of neuroimaging says it's 70,000 a day. But they're so quick. We are always in the feeling of our thinking, but because the thoughts are just flow through us, we kind of, it's like almost getting a shadow of a feeling. So it's not a conscious thought, but at the same time, you are having a thought of when you had that cigarette, and you're building on that thought because you're adding more thoughts to it. I had one client who she was talking about smoking, and actually she hated anybody to know that she smoked. She used to go out on her balcony and furtively have a cigarette and really hope that none of the neighbours would happen to be looking out of their window and see her. So it was kind of almost like shameful for her. But when she spoke about it, it didn't sound like that. And I said to her, the way you're talking, I said, it sounds like you're Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany having a cigarette on the fire escape. And she said, oh my God. She said, I used to live in New York, and I used to have a cigarette on the fire escape, and I used to think I was in that film. So her reality is furtively having a cigarette and hoping no one sees her. In her mind, she's having a cigarette and she's in a film.
Yeah.
And I had another client who said, well, I just love that cigarette. I like to sit out in the garden and have a coffee. And she said, and it reminds me of going away with my friends when I was years ago. I had a girlfriend I went away with, and after breakfast we would always sit out in the sun and have a coffee and have a cigarette. And I said, okay, so where do you smoke now? And actually, most of the time, if she did take a drink out with her, it was a green tea, and she rarely sat outside because the weather wasn't very good. So she said, well, actually, I'm standing under a dripping pipe, like a gutter, trying to avoid the drips, having this cigarette. Well, that's the reality.
Well, that's it. That's the
But when
thing.
she told me the story she was running, she was in Greece having a coffee after breakfast. You see?
Exactly. And something I picked up on in what you just said was that we, you know, it's like it's the thought. We definitely have that thought, but we almost don't even question the thought as well. This is the thing. Is that we don't even, we've just, it is the way it is because that thought is so repeated. So a cigarette will make me feel better. Oh, I'm having a cigarette. You know, like I'm having a cigarette. Like I have to have a cigarette. It's like we don't even understand that we don't have to have a cigarette. We really think it. We've not questioned that the cigarette is making us feel better or not. It's not even a part of it. It's just a habitual thought, then action with no conscious understanding that it, first of all, can't make you feel better, and it's not making you feel better.
Exactly.
And maybe you walking out the room and getting some fresh air and your thoughts are changing then anyway, so you may be less stressed in that moment, but it's not because of the actual inhalation of the nicotine.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But you see, the part of the brain that, as I say, lights out when we have, when you know, we have a habit, when we first start doing something, I think it's like the nucleus accumbens or something. But anyway, then it moves after a while into a different part of the brain where habits are formed. So then it becomes a habit, you see. Well, nail biting is a habit. And people might say, oh, someone's got a nasty habit if they bite their nails. But no one says they're addicted to nail biting. Yes. But in that part of the brain, it's exactly the same place, you see. So sometimes I think it's quite nice to actually let go of the label of addiction. Yeah. Because once somebody thinks they're addicted to something, well, then that's fact, isn't it?
Right, I see. Yeah. So yeah, tell me more about that. Like,
well, because as I say, addiction in the WHO, the WHO, there's a whole checklist of things to tell you if you're addicted to something or not. Okay. Well, it's a bit like, I don't know if you've ever looked at the checklist to see if you're a psychopath. But, you know, in the field of psychopathy, there's a checklist, and it's a Dr. Hare provided a checklist, which is fantastic in its right setting. But you know, people will look at that list and diagnose somebody they know. Oh, he's definitely a psychopath because he fits 5 of these things. You see? So
yeah, I have heard of that. I have heard someone got a book out on that, and it's exactly what you're saying. Like we could all probably go, yeah, I've done that, thought that, thought that.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean to say you're a psychopath. You just tick some of the things. It's like OCD. You know, most people have OCD tendencies, but we don't say they're OCD. You see what I'm saying? I think once somebody is given a label, and the label of addiction is incredibly hard to get rid of. Mm-hmm. Because if you think you're addicted to something, then it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Yeah, I have an addiction. Yeah. Now you see, so it's like people will say, if they have an addiction, it's not their fault. They're not looking to see why they think they want the thing. They just give up. Oh, I'm addicted. It's not my fault. You see? But if somebody has an addiction to smoking, say, I mean, I had one woman come to me who had beaten drugs and alcohol. She had been in rehab in America, and she didn't have that anymore, but she had an addiction to smoking. And for some reason, she felt she couldn't get rid of that. And there were lots of reasons, actually, when we looked at it, that she felt that she couldn't. But you see, that's quite common. People will go from one addiction to another. And quite often people have dual addictions. So somebody who takes drugs might drink too much too. Mm-hmm. Somebody who overeats, they might only overeat when they drink too much, you know, those kind of things. But it doesn't mean that, you know, that's always the way. An alcoholic won't necessarily have an addiction to cake.
Yeah,
but you know, these things get lumped together, and I think we've got one. But when somebody gives up an addiction to food. They then have an addiction to exercise. Then they realize they have that. So then they give that up, and then they have an addiction to smoking. Whatever it would be, you know, we know that people jump from addiction to addiction. And then they'll say, I have an addictive personality. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No, all that's happening is that they haven't looked to see where their feeling is coming from. So all they're doing is changing the addiction rather than seeing that their addiction is caused by their thinking and they're looking for a feeling.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So it means that, well, yeah, there's cravings. The way I see it is that there's cravings on one hand, and then there's this idea that we're not okay without something else. There's the craving of like the habitual thought craving part, and then there's this kind of unconscious acceptance that our feelings are dependent on something outside of us as well, like circumstances, stressful situations, money worries, or relationships situations. All of these things, if they are perceived to be okay, will give you a nice feeling, and then all of these things that when they're not okay will give you a bad feeling. And so because you've had that bad feeling, you then need something to solve the feeling, and so you look for another external source such as a cigarette or food to kind of dissipate the feelings. And we think that it's all going on out there, like this thing out here is bad, so I need this to make me feel better, when the only thing that's actually changing how you feel is the difference in thinking. And that's why it doesn't always make us feel better when we've eaten food. Like, really, it doesn't. Well, no, that's what I mean. But we may have at some point thought the pleasure of putting chocolate in your mouth is kind of distracting from it, and or, you know, walking down the road and going shopping, or, you know, and what's actually changing is the thinking during that. And sometimes the thinking doesn't change, and that's why you don't feel better either. And that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like the thinking is the key, not the external action. Yeah,
always. You see, the thing is as well that we know, and this was studies done with the 4 monkeys again, that dopamine is produced at the thought of something and not when the action is taken. So as I said, there's lots of research in this, but if somebody is wanting chocolate, say, they have the pleasure at the thought of having the chocolate, but not as they're eating the chocolate. Dopamine's not running as they eat the chocolate, it's at the thought of it, you see. So even the thing that we think we crave isn't giving us pleasure when we have it anyway. Yeah? But in the case of smoking, people will they'll say things like, oh, I can concentrate better at work if I've had a cigarette. And I'm like, okay, you know, tell me how. But what happens is they sit down to do something at work, or if they work at home, they sit down to do it, and they think, oh, well, I'll have a cigarette when I finish this. I won't have a cigarette. Or maybe I'll wait 10 minutes. Shall I wait 10 minutes and have a cigarette? But I really need to get this done, so I won't have a cigarette yet. All they're doing is constantly thinking about cigarettes. Yeah? So in the end, they crack, they go, they have a cigarette, and then they come back. So they've let go of the thought of the cigarette, and they come back and they say, you see, I knew a cigarette would help me concentrate.
Yeah.
But all they've done is let go of the thought of the cigarette, you see. And it's like if somebody had a craving for whatever it would be, whether it was alcohol, drugs, whatever it would be. Supposing you were walking down the road and you were really craving this thing, and you're thinking, okay, I've passed the shop, I didn't go in there, but the next shop I've got to go in and I can't. And then something happens. Maybe a child runs out into the road and there's a bus coming, okay? In that moment, we reset, absolute clarity. We just reset. You'd grab the child, you'd put the child back on the pavement and do whatever you do. Where did the craving go? You didn't think, oh God, there's a child that can't, but I need to have a cigarette.
Yeah.
You know, it goes because it's not real. The real The reality, the feeling that we're born with is that reset. But then you see, maybe you think, oh, well, I've just saved that child. I deserve a cigarette, a drink, a line, whatever. So you go back to the thoughts and start running those again.
Well, that's exactly. I totally see that. It's like suddenly, if the house was on fire, you wouldn't be running for your fags, would you? Exactly.
Yes.
It's like you're not going to be thinking about that. So suddenly, the craving shifts, and so
but afterwards, that's when people will think, oh my God, I need a cigarette. That was
so stressful. But
yeah, but if that was so stressful, they would have needed one at the time of stress.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But they didn't need one at the point of stress. They think they need it because they're thinking about what just happened.
Yeah.
So they're thinking about what might have happened, the what ifs, and then they think they need something to help them cope with what just happened.
Yeah, even though it's already gone.
But they coped with what just happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I see it. Yeah, I see that.
And I some point last year something happened, I think, and it was a bit of a shock. I had a bit of a shock, and my first thought, out of nowhere, because I haven't had a cigarette for years and years and years, many years, I can't even remember when, but my first thought was, oh my God, I need a cigarette. And I could really laugh at that. I was like, wow, that's really funny. Where did that come from? That's a really old thought that popped up there. But because I could see it as a thought, I didn't see that it was an instruction to go and get a cigarette.
Absolutely. And you pulled up on this before, and it's something that I keep finding myself saying at the moment, is that we have mental thoughts a lot of the time, and we just don't choose to act on them because of course we're not going to, because we have just the weirdest thoughts and judgments that we make on people that we don't even mean. That's something that I've noticed, is like I will think a thought and it will be really awful about someone, and I don't think it, like I don't believe it. It doesn't come from me almost. It's like it just comes through my head, and I look at it and I think, God, why would you think that?
But so what?
Yeah, and so
what? You thought it, so what?
But what I mean is that those thoughts are they're meaningless, and we can see that they're meaningless. But then on the other hand, we look at thoughts of, I am a smoker, I like cigarettes, I need a fag, I'm so stressed, I could never give up smoking, as if they hold meaning. Like, but then, thoughts of killing someone don't hold meaning because you're not going to do it. It isn't really you. It's like, I'm just having it. It's not, it's just come up. And it's the same with cigarettes. Like we've given the power to it, even though it is just a thought. There's not levels of more powerful thoughts than other ones. They're just thoughts.
Yes. And if with cigarettes, so if on the first day you stop, you do have you feel like there's a physical need to have one, well, just don't don't make too much of it, and then by the next day you won't have that physical part. But if you start to think, oh, I don't know, you could think I'm a bit jittery. Oh, that's the physical part of it. Oh, should I have a cigarette because I'm a bit shaky? Well, actually, the cigarette would make you shakier because the cigarette would speed up your heartbeat and cause all of these chemical reactions. So people even attribute something to withdrawal that isn't. It's just that's what they are. Their thinking is telling them something, and they're feeling it, and they're attributing it to a withdrawal. So that's the other thing that people do.
Yeah. That I can see that so much. Oh, it must be that I need a cigarette. But actually,
I must need a cigarette. Oh, I've really got to fight this. I've really got to battle it. Yeah. But when you were just saying about calling yourself a smoker or a drinker or an alcoholic or whatever label, psychopath, whatever label, nail biter, people take that on and then they believe it's them. Again, I can't help that. That's my personality. Okay.
Yeah.
As if their personality is fixed. and your personality isn't fixed. You know, in 1990, I can't remember who it was, in Texas, the university in Texas thought they had discovered the alcoholism gene. Okay, so they got really excited because they thought they'd discovered this gene, and therefore that they could help people to not become alcoholics in the first time. They were going to test children to see if they had the gene, blah blah blah. And anyway, then they had to, a few years later, make another public announcement to say, actually, we got it all wrong, and there is no such thing as an alcoholic gene, because there is no such thing as a personality gene. You know, our genes are switched off by environment. So they're switched off and on by the environment we're in because of the way we think of the environment. So we switch our own genes off and on, you know. I mean, the whole genome, Paul, people that there must be millions and billions of, you know, these genes in us, this genome. We have the same amount of genes as an earthworm.
Wow.
That's it. That's it. You know? So the whole kind of, this is me, this is my personality. No, it's the one you've taken on and the one that you have decided is you. And then you're fighting against something that you've created.
Yes, exactly that. That is exactly what it is. We end up seeking to resolve the thing that we're actually creating in that moment at the same time as trying to rectify it, because we're saying, I am this, I am that. Totally. That's how I realized, that's how I stopped doing coke, was that I just saw that all I did was think about coke, whether it was the thought of giving up coke or whether it was doing coke or coke in every sentence. I couldn't not do it because I was just always thinking about it.
Of course. So, but you see, the craving didn't come from the coke. It came from you thinking about the coke. So it doesn't even matter, as you say, if you think, oh, I'm not going to have it, because we don't process a negative, it's still a thought about coke, a thought about coke, a thought about coke.
Yeah.
And if thoughts were like snowflakes, and they land and they melt and they land and they melt and they land and they melt, that's fine. It comes through you, it goes. It comes through you, it goes. But if you start layering one on top of another, it's like suddenly it's like having a snowball.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot harder to shift.
Yeah.
And if you're layering it and keep thinking about it, of course, if you don't have it, you think your head's going to explode.
Yeah.
But
so
again,
so what do you do, because with the way you work with people with addictions and with their cravings, like you just say, just like, what's the process?
Stop it. I really try and get them to see why they think they want that thing. So if it's a lot of the time with addiction, and you will know this, a lot of the time with addiction is to numb thoughts. So it doesn't matter what it is. So it doesn't matter if it's a bit like me saying something happened and my first thought was have a cigarette. Well, the reason is, even to do that, was to take me out of that thinking. Okay, so a lot of the time people have an addiction because they can't, they are too frightened of their own thoughts. But when they see that their thoughts are created by those, their thoughts, as we know, thought is just energy. So they're creating the wrapper that goes on thought. They see how easy it is to let go of the thought. Mm. Then they can see how easy it would be to let go of the addiction. Yeah. So it depends on really how strongly someone identifies with their story. You know, there's no kind of one way, really. It's all going to be the same thing. It all comes down to the way we think. But there's no one way to work with people.
Yeah.
That would be far too easy, sorry. But, you know, it's more to help them to see what they think it gives them.
Yeah. Okay. I totally agree. So, yeah, so if you're, so just to round that up, to summarize that, if you think that a cigarette or a line of coke or heroin or chocolate or any of these things are doing something for you, then you're misunderstanding where your experience is coming from, because it's always coming from thinking, like thought process taking form. Everything that's happening is coming from within you, like the experience of it is all coming from within you, including the stress from a work. It looks like it's coming from jobs, or it looks like it's coming from the boyfriend, or it looks like it's coming from the person who's just died. And it's like all of that looks like it's creating an internal problem, like upset, anger, stress. And then we think, well, because it's out there, we need an outside solution to deal with this internal problem. And in just thinking, I think that's what, in just blocking, just not thinking about that and seeking a solution changes the thinking in itself, because you're then like, right, looking in another direction rather than looking directly at the stress still. You're looking in another direction, in which case then it does start to dissolve anyway, because you're not looking at it anymore. Exactly. The problem is no longer there, but then you're fixing on the outside thing to fix you again, i.e. the alcohol, etc. When I get that, I'll be all right. When I get that, I'll be all right. And then it's a new stress, because it's like, when I have that, I'll be happy. Yes. When I have this, I'll be happy. Yes. You're not even, it's just moment to moment to moment thinking, creating the experience that you're having in that moment. Yeah.
Yes. And it's we react to what we see as outside triggers. So we react to stress, to all the things you just mentioned. Or it's like if somebody having a wine in the evening, you know, I'm certainly not against people having wine in the evening. I like a glass of wine. But if I had it because I thought I'd had a good day, I deserved it, really, or I've had a bad day, I need it. Yeah. If you fancy it because you fancy it, you quite like the taste and you want it, that's, you know, but if you're having it because you think it's going to give you something, then you're looking in the wrong place. And when you point people to see, okay, why would you think you needed that? What would be, what, you know, can you see that the thoughts you're having are causing you to need it, it's not because of the thing that just happened. And so the more you point people back to the feeling and where the feeling comes from, the easier it is for them to see, because we have it coded so much that a thing will give us relief, pleasure, or whatever it does. You know, if this was true, then people wouldn't get well after they'd had a placebo operation, let's say. You see,
absolutely, yeah, you're right.
You know, and I don't know if you saw, there was something on. I can't remember if it was Horizon sometime last year, maybe, I don't know, or the year before. And it was about the Mayo Clinic and the operations, the back operations they do. And they had decided to do an experiment where they were doing placebo operations. And they would go in, they would gown up, the patient would be anaesthetized, they would go in, and a computer would flash up placebo or operation. And if it was operation, they operated. And if it was placebo, they manipulated the spine and they said, well, Miss Bainbridge, we're just going to open your spine now. And they opened a bag of the cement they used to fuse the vertebrae. Apparently it smells like bubble gum. And they would walk through the operation talking. And people got well.
Wow. That is fascinating, isn't it?
And there was one old lady, I think she was about 78, and she had had a back operation. She had broken her back, her vertebrae, the year before. So she knew what it was like to recover from that. But she cracked her back again. She slipped on the tiles in her kitchen and cracked her back and had to go in. And I think it was like the day after the operation, because she got the placebo, she was up walking. And within a week, she was playing golf every day.
Wow.
So they hadn't done anything.
Yeah. So that is it. That's why.
It's the power of the mind, the power of our thoughts. There's no difference to that in addiction.
Of course.
Yeah. Now, if you locked somebody up, if somebody wanted to give up smoking, and you locked them in a room in a padded cell, at the end of a week, they probably would still think they were as addicted as they went in. Because you'd be locking them in that padded cell, not being able to see where their experience comes from. So they would have the stress of being locked away as well. I need a cigarette to deal with that stress. But if you didn't help them to see where their feeling of addiction came from, they would still be as addicted. Physically, there would be no addiction.
Absolutely.
Yeah? And that's why people who stop smoking, so there's no physical addiction because they stop for a week, a month, 6 months, but then they have a cigarette. That's why they believe that it's because I'm addicted.
Yeah.
Well, there's no physical addiction, especially after that time. So what are they addicted to?
Yeah.
They're addicted to their thinking.
So, okay, so they are addicted to their thinking. I see that. And they're addicted to acting upon that thought when it comes up. That's what makes people act on thoughts more than others.
Because they think it's going to give them something.
Yeah.
Now, it's like that when I said I had that thought suddenly, oh, I need a cigarette. Yeah. Now, as I say, I could laugh at that because I could see that's a really old thought. That's really come from, a long time ago. Yeah. How funny is that? Now, if I maybe hadn't come across this understanding, or I don't know, wasn't working with it, I would have believed that was an instruction.
Yeah.
I could have seen that. Oh, I had that thought because I am supposed to go and get a cigarette to help me through this. Mm-hmm. See, so a thought comes up, an old thought, and that's all it is. It's an old thought. But what people do is they believe that means something. It must be true because I've had this. It must be true.
It must be true.
So
I need
then
that.
they act on
what
it.
I need. Yeah.
Yeah, and then because they've got themselves in whatever it is, they've got into stressful thinking about something, and the old thought comes back. You need a cigarette. Oh my God, I need a cigarette. I'll go and get a cigarette. So they go and get a cigarette. They let go of the thing they were thinking about, the stressful thoughts about whatever it was, in order to have the cigarette. Then they think, yeah, I needed a cigarette.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But all they've done is let go in that second of the thoughts they're having.
Yeah, I think that's really amazing, that, definitely. And like you said, if suddenly then, just before they lit the cigarette, someone was just about to get murdered, oh, well, the cigarette's no longer important. It's not even on the mind.
Yes.
So therefore, it isn't a craving. So therefore,
exactly.
It's there.
It's a knee-jerk reaction to something, to old thinking, old thinking. Yeah. Now, when I was when I was young, you could still smoke in cinemas. Okay.
Yeah.
And so half the audience would be smokers, say, and half weren't. So you might have gone to the cinema with a friend or a boyfriend or partner or whatever, who maybe you smoked and he didn't, or a friend that didn't. And I remember in a really kind of scary film, something would happen on screen, and then instantly you would hear click, 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 and everyone would go for a cigarette. Oh my God, that was so scary. Let's have a cigarette. Yeah, used to do it myself. Oh, I've got a cigarette. Oh my God, that was so scary. Have a cigarette. Well, firstly, we know.
So the feeling of being scared means I need something.
I've got to calm down. Well, firstly, we know that obviously it's coming from it's not coming from the thing. It's coming from the way we think about the film, because someone else might have thought that wasn't scary at all. Didn't you see that coming?
Yeah.
But equally, the half in the cinema that didn't smoke, well, they had the same feeling. Why didn't they need a cigarette? If it was coming from the situation, the stress, the scare feeling, whatever, why did the people who didn't smoke, why didn't they need a cigarette?
Exactly. It's just a total mental dependency, and it doesn't need
Yeah, it's just you're thinking about it. If cigarettes were that addictive, we would never be able to not have a cigarette. We'd never be able to pass a packet if it was on next to us. We'd have to have one. But that's like saying compulsive gambling is caused by a pack of cards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just because it goes inside of us, we've made some connection with
It's
it.
the connection we've made.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I talk about, 6-year-old Susie falls over and her mum buys her an ice cream to distract her, and then fast forward 20 years and 26-year-old Susie breaks up with her boyfriend, and she's feeling sad because she's broken up with her boyfriend, so she wants that feeling of love and connection that she felt when her mum bought her the ice cream, so she goes and buys a tub or two of ice cream because that's going to make her feel better.
Yeah.
But it's not the ice cream that's going to make her feel better, it's that feeling of love and connection that she had when she ate the ice cream all those years ago.
Yeah.
You see, so we're always looking for a feeling.
Yeah.
But our feelings don't come from out there.
Yeah. Amazing. So thank you. I'm aware of time, and we've taken up a lot of your time already, which is lovely.
Yeah, I love chatting, don't I?
I know.
I could go
great. Great. So good at it. It was so clear. It's been wonderful. So if someone wants to talk to you directly, what can they do?
Well, they can find all my details on my website, ElaineHilides.com. That's Elaine, Hilides, ElaineHilides.com. So everything's on there.
Okay, and I'll put it in the group as well. So
that's nice, thank you. That's
no problem. Okay, well, thank you. So just to summarize, I just want to summarize, because it's like we have all these lovely things.
I've gone.
No, but we both do that, and it needs to do that because people can follow it. But just to summarize, a craving is just a feeling that we've attached an action to. It's like we need to act upon this feeling now because it's an instruction. But what it really is, it's just a mental construction that doesn't need any behaviour.
Yes, a craving is only ever a thought. It can't be anything else. It's only ever a thought about the thing that we think we want. That's all it is. So a craving, a craving pops, because if you have a craving and you build it up and you build it up, and as I say, then something happens, maybe the phone rings, you're chatting, or it disappears, it's gone, because it isn't real.
Yeah.
So it's recognizing that cravings are totally self-created.
Yeah.
And when you realize that, then there's no, you see, it's like we react to external triggers. Somebody who maybe drinks too much, I'll be watching a program, and in the adverts there's an advert for wine, and they have that wonderful pop, as the cork is poured. Well, now actually there are hardly any bottles of wine with corks, but people would react to the cork, to that sound, or that glug 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 glug. They're very clever. So people then have a thought about how they think that would be nice, and then they get a feeling, and then they think, oh, I have to have that. Well, it didn't come from the TV.
Yeah, can't do.
It came from your thinking about that noise.
Yeah.
Tony, my partner, doesn't drink. He never has drunk. He just doesn't see why anybody would. He just doesn't like the taste. Mm-hmm. So for him, that would have nothing. That would have no effect on him.
Yeah.
So it's not coming from there.
It's how we're perceiving everything. Yeah.
It's absolutely. How we're thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, Elaine. And I will put the email in the group below. So thank you. Have you got anything else you'd like to say?
Oh gosh, no, don't ask me that. Because I could talk all day, couldn't I? I'd be thinking, end this. End this. And I just think it's so incredibly liberating when we see where our feelings are coming from. And it doesn't mean to say we don't have cravings. It doesn't mean to say that we don't get caught up in our thinking. So what? Yeah, as I say, if you have a craving for something, so what?
Yeah. It's just a thought, and
it doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
Mean anything.
Yeah.
You'll be okay.
And as I say, that's the difference between giving up giving up smoking, battling it, fighting it, and just giving it up.
And that's why I call it instant freedom, because when you see that it's just a thought, you are free.
Yes.
You're free to choose whatever you want. It's a freedom.
Yes.
Freedom that comes around. You're not a slave to anything.
Exactly. Well, that's what addiction is. That the literary Latin term for addiction is enslavement. And yet, isn't it nice that you're not?
Exactly. Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And everyone who has listened, thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Okay then. Bye, Lucy.
Bye.